Welcome to People. I'm WSB TV Vice President and General Manager Ray Carter. This program launched in 1983, and since then, our mission has always been to raise awareness about issues that impact Metro Atlanta and North Georgia. 2020 has been a year we will not soon forget. From a pandemic that virtually shut down the country and drastically altered the lives of every American, to the killings of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and the many others whose untimely deaths have led to an awakening in America about systemic racism. Over the next 2 episodes of People to People, WSB Gets Real has an open and honest conversation about racism in Georgia. We are examining the issues that impact our communities. We're discussing potential solutions and embracing uncomfortable conversations to spark positive change. Because as the late Congressman John Lewis said, we are one people with one family. We all live in the same house. Or as we like to say at WSB TV, we're in this together.
Channel 2's People to People, community coverage you can count on.
Welcome to this special edition of People to People, WSB Gets Real. I'm Linda Stouffer. No one is immune to COVID-19. Each week we're learning so much more about how this disease attacks different people. And one thing is evident, people of color are facing greater risks. Channel 2 investigative reporter Nicole Carr explores racial inequities and COVID-19.
I was having aches, pains, chills, backache, cough. I lost my taste, my smell, everything.
Deborah Crowder's symptoms matched everything on the list. Last month, the 47-year-old tested positive for COVID.
Several nights that I could feel myself stop breathing as I slept.
Although Crowder has rarely left her Carroll County home since March, there are things on another list that checked off, making Crowder a prime candidate for COVID. African American, underlying conditions, living in a multi-generational home with children who work essential jobs.
This means a lot of different things.
It does. So when we talk about how race and ethnicity are interplaying with risk for COVID-19, what we're really talking about is your ability to socially distance, your ability to stay at home.
Dr. Jody Guest is a research professor in epidemiology at Emory University. In addition to historical inequities in healthcare access and treatment, Guest highlights occupation and economics and factors behind the disproportionate effect COVID has on minorities. People of color are more likely to work essential jobs that just can't be done remotely. For example, CDC research showing nearly a quarter of working Hispanic, Black, or African Americans working in the service industry compared to 16% of non-Hispanic white workers.
So when all of us were sent home in mid-March, are you in one of the professions or jobs that continue to work and was necessary to keep our communities going? And that continues to put you at increased risk.
People do whatever they have to survive.
In February, right before we became familiar with COVID, we took a look at NYU research comparing life expectancy in more than 500 U.S. cities, 11 of them here in Georgia. And in Metro Atlanta, it is the zip code that separated deaths by up to 2 decades. In Buckhead's Paces neighborhood, the life expectancy was 87. In Mechanicsville,
I'm surprised it's 65.
It drops by 2 decades.
We're not eating right because there's a food desert. We're not sleeping good because of the violence that we might hear in the neighborhood.
Some of the reasons behind it also play a part in what we see and how COVID impacts minority communities, where residents are more likely to suffer from certain ailments, less likely to have access to things like decent air quality and spacious housing options.
Cities with high variability in life expectancy by neighborhood are also the same cities that are experiencing segregation patterns that push Black and Latino families into neighborhoods that have been deprived.
Then there's a problem that will play into moving past COVID.
Can you talk about how trust factors into care?
Yes, there is no doubt that there have been many years and many examples of communities of color being taken advantage of in medicine and research.
A recent Gallup poll showed a third of Americans polled said they won't accept a COVID-19 vaccine when it's available.
If you're a minority, how can you feel confident that For the first time, society is now giving you a preference, and you say to yourself, no, they're using me as a guinea pig because they don't want to be the first ones to be vaccinated.
And I still hear people say that don't think it's as serious as it is. And I hear people say, well, I don't know where to go to get tested. I can't afford to get tested.
4 members of her immediate family have also tested positive for COVID, including a son who can't work remotely. She and health experts say testing and knowledge are power.
I think a lot of people are afraid to just know the truth. I think I've heard a lot of people just ashamed of saying, I have COVID or I've had COVID.
I think that to some extent, if there's a silver lining in COVID-19, it's that it's given a national stage to really speak about these generational issues of racism and inequalities.
Nicole Carr for People to People.
And if that motivates you to go out and get a COVID-19 test, health experts are urging you to also get a flu shot. It won't reduce your chance of getting coronavirus, but it will help with things like resources. Officials are worried a very active flu season will tie up resources that are already stretched thin as we deal with COVID-19. And our family-to-family partner, Kroger, has a plan for flu shots with the challenges of COVID-19. Kroger offers touchless in-store flu shot appointments. It's also holding drive-through flu shot clinics across Metro Atlanta. September 23rd, they'll be at Gwinnett Church Hamilton Mill in Beaufort. On September 30th, Elizabeth Baptist Church on Cascade Road in Atlanta. Just go to WSBTV.com/community for the times and details on making an appointment. Well, confusion about voting rights is an issue as we head towards the November elections. Channel 2 anchor Sophia Choi reports the Georgia Justice Project believes misinformation may keep voters from even casting a ballot.
The biggest misconceptions, according to the Georgia Justice Project, if you have a felony conviction or if you're sitting behind bars like here at the Fulton County Jail, you cannot vote. Both are not true.
People who've been incarcerated, they often feel very disconnected from society.
The Georgia Justice Project believes out of some 350,000 former Georgia felons, thousands are not exercising their legitimate right to vote. Unlike nearby states like Alabama and Florida, in Georgia, you can vote even if you served a sentence for a felony conviction.
I like to call it one of the big urban myths in Georgia, and that is that if you have a felony conviction, the myth goes, you can never vote again in Georgia. And that is not the law.
The Georgia Justice Project is located on Edgewood Avenue in southeast Atlanta. The nonprofit has worked for more than 30 years to help people re-enter society after prison. They believe voting is an integral part of that.
Re-entering society, they think about getting a job, they think about getting housing, or, where am I going to get food? But, we believe that voting is also important because it is an individual participating in their community and exercising their civic right to vote.
Once you're back in society and your rights are restored, there is no better way of showing up and showing that you're part of the community than by voting and helping our community decide where we're going to go together.
You are eligible to vote in Georgia if you meet these requirements. You completed the felony sentence. You're in jail, but not serving for a felony conviction. You are under a first offender sentence that hasn't been revoked. And you meet all other basic requirements for voting like registration, age, citizenship, and residency. We spoke to these two ladies walking by the Georgia Justice Project Center. They believe the right to vote should be reinstated once you do your time.
I feel like they have the rights to vote because we're all human and we all gonna make mistakes.
If it's a felon or something and they are still a citizen of the United States, they should be able to vote.
The Georgia Justice Project says now is the time to get this information out so people can register to vote in time. The deadline is October 5th. In Northwest Atlanta, I'm Sophia Choi for People to People.
And more on that, you can go to WSBTV.com, click on the Election 2020 tab for that information on registering to vote, where to vote, details about your district, and also how to request an absentee ballot. Well, you probably heard the phrase, the Atlanta way. It's a reference to the unprecedented way Atlanta's black and white leaders cooperated for the greater good of the city. WSB Community and Public Affairs Director Candace Presley had a candid conversation with Dr. Bernice King, where they got real about systemic racism, the wealth gap, and protecting your right to vote.
My guest for today's People to People One-on-One is the Reverend Bernice A. King. Of course, you know she is the daughter of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dr. King, WSB TV is getting real about the issue of systemic racism in the Atlanta community and the many ways we see it. What is your view of systemic racism in Atlanta?
Well, I think that in Atlanta, we have a lot of systemic issues, more so around the racial wealth gap in particular. If you look at the history of Atlanta, there's always been, this whole divide between the North and the South Side, which predominantly means North Side, white, South Side, Black. And the way in which industry develops, business develops, is usually the North side of town. And the Black side of town is usually overlooked and neglected. I would say the same is the case as it relates to home ownership, investment in housing communities. Much of the development has been focused toward the northern side, not the southern side. And why did I say that? Because one of the main ways that people build wealth in our world is through home ownership. If you don't have development that is surrounded by the right kind of services, then it affects, the appraisal value of your home. And so we've had a history of that divide in Atlanta and have not really focused a lot on what to do about it. I think in other ways, in terms of leadership, executive leadership in Atlanta, there's still a systemic problem around having Blacks in major roles in corporate leadership, C-suites. And so when I think about systemic racism in Atlanta, those are the things that come to my mind. I think we have fallen severely short because, as I said, there is a tremendous wealth gap. There is a fundamental problem in our educational system. Real estate impacts education. I mean, we know that our tax dollars from home ownership go into our educational system. So if you have communities where there have been tremendous foreclosures or housing values are lower, then you can imagine what that means for that school system. And Atlanta has suffered that. So we do have a very serious systemic problem, in particular as it relates to economics.
And yet Atlanta is a city, it's a destination city where people want to move, especially people of color. They see elected leadership that looks like them, and yet you say there's still this ginormous gap. How do we go about closing it?
Where do you start? I don't know. It means people have to be comfortable enough to get uncomfortable. We're used to operating a certain way. We're used to certain people being in the room and in the conversation. We don't like being challenged as leaders because sometimes those challenges, kind of expose some things in terms of our practices. But the only way we're going to move forward is in truth, transparency, and vulnerability as leadership.
There is an election coming up in several weeks. There are many people with concerns that their votes may not be counted, and some in the Black community say, well, what's the point of trying to participate? What do you say to them?
I would say the point is that this right to vote is the one thing that gives us a voice in our government. It's, in many respects, it is one of the major great equalizers in our nation. That's why for years there have been efforts to suppress it, to deny it to groups of people so that we can concentrate the power, because much of what we do from day to day is dictated by laws, by policy. And so don't give that up to somebody else.
Learning online during the pandemic, why experts worry it could place more students at risk of falling behind. Getting real about finances, and it starts in the courtroom.
I heard hundreds of stories of people saying how they lost property because their family member didn't have a will.
The new outreach that could help families, next on People to People. Earlier, Dr. Bernice King mentioned the wealth gap and its role in systemic racism. Well, one newly elected Fulton County judge is using her office to help break down those walls. Channel 2's Tom Jones explains how she's getting real by shaking things up at the courthouse.
Kenya Johnson has done amazing work in the Solicitor General's office. Her innovative initiatives have helped improve lives. Now she's taking her talents to the bench. That's where she plans to make changes that will improve lives even more.
Is that where I pay my probation fees?
Kenya Johnson says that's what some people think probate court is for. Now that voters have elected her as the new Fulton County Probate Court judge, she hopes to change that.
We will make sure that probate court is everyone's court and that everyone knows about it.
Johnson plans to have ambassadors in the community spreading the word about the importance of having estate planning.
I heard hundreds of stories of people saying how they lost property because their family member didn't have a will.
Probate issues firearms licenses. There is an uptick in people applying for them.
And the lines have been around the country have been very huge.
Johnson wants to reduce those long lines and provide crime prevention programs to keep people safe. Johnson is not afraid of change or shaking things up. She is currently the chief deputy in the Fulton County Solicitor's Office.
At the beginning of the George Floyd Memorial March.
But was not afraid to show up at a march against police brutality. She believes in equality for all.
It is our duty to improve society.
Johnson has worked with Solicitor General Keith Gamage to implement programs that not just lock people up, but help them up.
We look for ways to rehabilitate, to also get accountability.
Programs like Guns Down, Heads Up. It teaches young people about the dangers of gun violence. She's also helped organize criminal records expungement fairs.
It's an honor to be able to give people second chances where appropriate.
Johnson says COVID-19 has caused an increase in domestic violence cases. So look out for an ad campaign that will let victims know how to get help.
We want to get the word to the people. We can't help them if they don't know that the resources exist.
Gamage says Johnson is an incredible asset.
She brings not only a passion, but a very high intellect and a commitment to the community.
Johnson says her passion comes from realizing someone helped her get to where she is.
It is a blessing to be able to help someone else.
I'm Tom Jones for People to People.
The Fulton County's Probate Information Center offers help with dealing with the descendant's estate. It is open to Fulton County residents. You can get a free 30-minute consultation with an attorney. They'll provide guidance, they'll answer questions. Go to WSBTV.com/community for information on scheduling an appointment for that. COVID-19's lasting impact on Georgia elections, why counties are searching for new poll workers, and getting real about online learning, the students who might be having the hardest time getting ahead. I'll tell you all about it when People to People returns. Children across Metro Atlanta have for weeks now been logging on for school. It's not always easy. As Channel 2's Michael Seiden learned, it's especially challenging for Black, Latino, and low-income students.
For Ebony Walker, a mother of three, virtual learning has become a full-time job.
I am a stay-at-home mom, which is a blessing.
But that's not reality for many low-income families. For them, remote learning has proven to be the latest example of education inequality. A national consulting group found the average student could fall behind 7 months, while Black and Hispanic students could experience even greater losses. 10 months for Black children, and 9 months for Latinos. It's the reason why parents are joining Facebook groups like Raising Leaders, which connects brown and Black communities with resources ranging from teachers and tutors to childcare and pandemic pods.
What we try to find is parents that can come together and find maybe a child care provider, which could be a friend, a college student, somebody that is much more affordable. And then what I do is I support that care provider, which is low cost, and give them the tools they need so that they can do that work and support it.
Some families have decided to explore other options. Aya Educational Institute in Stone Mountain is an online school serving middle and high school students that focuses on African American culture.
You don't have to leave your Blackness and Black concerns at home. In fact, we use those concerns to stimulate not only interest, but academic prowess.
Be okay with whatever works for your family. Don't feel like you have to do what everybody else is doing. Do what works for you.
For People to People, I'm Michael Seiden.
Fixing a problem that caused long lines during the June primaries, how counties are finding new poll workers. Next on People to People. September 15th marked the beginning of National Hispanic Heritage Month. It celebrates the anniversary of independence of Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. Mexico, Chile, and Belize also celebrate their independence during this time, and it recognizes the contributions of Hispanic and Latin Americans in the U.S. We're weeks away from the election, yet some counties are still recruiting poll workers. In Gwinnett County, some longtime poll workers did not return this year because of coronavirus concerns. As a precaution to protect workers, the state is providing county election boards with things like gloves, wipes, and sanitizer.
We are putting PPE items into place for our poll officials.
Cobb County is turning to organizations like the Cobb Association of Realtors to help fill open positions. Thank you for watching People to People, community coverage you can count on. Have a great day.